In the barren deserts of the American West, at the end of the 19th century, where the sun scorches even the faintest hope and the wind carries away broken promises, there was a young woman willing to risk everything just for a place to stay, and a man who had shut his heart to the world, yet found himself reaching out to protect her. This isn't just a love story. It's a journey of redemption, forgiveness, and rebirth. A story where even in cracked earth, wildflowers still bloom. You're watching the series Wild West Memories, where tales of love, loss, and hope are told with cinematic depth and human yield. If you love deep, emotionally rich stories set in the heart of the Wild West, make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and don't forget to like the video to support me in creating more high-quality series like this. And now our story begins. The sun was sinking behind Dusty Hollow, stretching shadows long and thin across the floorboards of the marshal's office. The heat clung to the timber walls like a second skin, stubborn and dry. Marshal Ethan Cole sat behind his weathered desk shirt, unbuttoned at the collar sleeves rolled to the elbow. His revolver rested beside a half-empty cup of coffee, stone cold. He'd been staring at the same sentence in a land dispute report for the better part of 15 minutes. But his mind refused to hold still. It hadn't for years, not since the fever took Anna and the child she'd carried. Somewhere out there, where the wind turned red with dust and memory, he knew the desert never forgot. A knock came soft, like it was unsure it belonged. He looked up. The door creaked open, and a woman stepped in. Dust clung to her boots. Sunburn painted her skin and her eyes. Her eyes were cracked amber, shattered, but still watching. She hesitated, standing just past the threshold. Not from fear, from experience. The kind that came from being turned away too many times. "I'm not here to cause trouble," she said. Ethan didn't move, didn't speak. He watched her the way you watch a wolf at the edge of your land, measured, but not hostile. "My name's Lucy," she added, her voice dry as desert bone. "I'm looking for work. I can cook, clean, tend animals, anything. I can even help you have children." The words dropped like stones into a dry well. Ethan blinked. The woman didn't flinch. Her gaze stayed fixed on his, steady, not pleading. But there was something in it. A kind of quiet surrender. He leaned back, slowly crossing his arms. "Is that a proposition, Miss Lucy?" "No," she said, voice cracking but unwavering. "It's a plea. Just don't send me away." He studied her, now really studied her. 26 maybe. Lean but not weak. Someone who had learned to face storms rather than run from them. A faint scar traced her jawline, barely hidden beneath tangled brown hair. Her dress was patched in too many places to count, but clean. Respectable even. "You're not from around here." She shook her head. "I've been everywhere. Kansas, El Paso, always moving. Running." Her throat bobbed, trying not to disappear. Ethan exhaled slow and deep. He'd seen 100 women like her in his time. Some carried knives, others lies. But a rare few, the unforgettable ones, carried silence that spoke volumes. And then a memory flickered, one he never liked to touch. 5 years ago, a girl had knocked just like this one. He'd turned her away, without asking her name. 3 days later, her body was found near the river. No shoes, no name, just cold and gone. He hadn't slept that week. "You don't look like a criminal," he said finally. "But that doesn't mean you're not." "I don't need to be liked," she said. "I just want a chance to earn a place." Something in her voice, hoarse, threadbare, heartbreakingly, even reminded him of Anna's final breath. Not the words, the weight. He rose from his chair, boots creaking against the old floor. For a long moment, he didn't speak. Then simply, "You hungry?" Lucy nodded. And just for a second, something shimmered behind her eyes, but she turned away too quickly for him to catch it. "There's stew out back," You eat. Then we talk. She didn't say thank you, just followed. And in that silence, Ethan felt it a shift in the dust so small, it could be mistaken for wind. But he knew better. Lucy ate in silence, standing by the back steps, like someone afraid to sit too long. Ethan didn't press her. When he went back inside, she stayed behind. He didn't see where she went afterward. Didn't ask. He figured she'd find her own place to sleep, or leave before dawn, like many had. Part 1 Conted, a place where the dust settles refined. Ethan woke before the sun, as he always did. The sky outside his window had barely begun to shift from black to a bruised violet, but he'd long ago lost the habit of sleeping past dawn. Habit was a hard thing to break, harder still, when it was all you had left. He stepped into his boots, splashed cold water on his face from the basin, and shrugged into his coat. The chill clung to his collarbone like a quiet warning. Outside the air was still. No birdsong. Just the low creak of a windmill and the rustle of dry leaves. Something felt off. He headed toward the barn. There, tucked into the corner of the hayloft, barely visible between stacks of feed and old tack, was Lucy. Curled up, shoes off a saddle blanket wrapped around her shoulders. One hand clutched her satchel, like a lifeline. Her other arm had hay stuck to it. She looked smaller in sleep, the kind of small that came not from youth, but from where. For a second, Ethan stood there unmoving. He didn't say her name, didn't shout, just stood still and watched. He thought about waking her. Then he thought about walking away. Instead, he knelt slowly and set a tin mug of water on the floor beside her. He turned left and let the barn door creak shut behind him. That afternoon he watched her from the kitchen window. She didn't ask, just picked up a rake and started clearing the yard like she'd been doing it her whole life. The rake was heavy, the ground was unkind, and yet she didn't falter. When the sweat beaded on her brow, she wiped it with her sleeve. When her hands blistered, she didn't flinch. Her right hand trembled slightly when she gripped the handle, a healed-over burn scar perhaps, but she pressed on. Ethan didn't call out. But every time she passed the window, he looked up. Just once. Then again. Dusty Hollow wasn't kind to outsiders. A town of 49 people and 3 last names. Church bell hadn't rung in weeks. The schoolhouse windows were boarded up. Even the dogs walked slower now, like they'd given up barking. They didn't take to strangers, especially women, who showed up in the dark with no man, no kin, no explanation. Ethan knew what they'd say if they saw her. Trouble, whore, thief. Same things they whispered about Anna, his wife, when she came here from the east before she softened the place with wildflowers, and songs the prairie hadn't heard before. But Anna was gone now, and the town had hardened again. So Ethan told no one about Lucy. Not yet. He let her rake, let her water the horses, let her fix the barn hinge that squeaked in the wind. And come supper time, he set out an extra plate. Said nothing when she sat down. Said even less when she reached for the salt, like it was her table too. But something in the quiet, the way she ate in small careful bites, like the food might vanish if she looked too eager, told him more than words ever could. She wasn't dangerous. She was just someone who had learned to make herself small enough to survive. That night, he stood beneath a ski freckled with stars. Coyotes howled far off. The moon was thin as a blade. The barn light was still on. He watched her shadow pass across the loft, sweeping, folding the blanket tight, like she expected to be chased out before dawn. He took a breath, then another. The pencil felt awkward in his fingers. It had been a long time since he'd written anything that mattered. Anna had once told him, "Kindness, Ethan, is still worth the risk." He laid a pair of work gloves on the fence post. Next to them, a note scratched on the back of an old receipt. If you're still here by sunrise, the stalls need mucking. If you're not, no hard feelings. E. Mornings at Cole Farm began before the sun breached the hills. Dew clung to the brittle grass like a reluctant memory, and the wind, sharp and early, moved through the stables with a breath of old hay. And Lucy worked quietly. Each day she rose before the rooster and moved like she belonged, though she never assumed she did. She cleaned troughs, fed the chickens, swept the barn aisle, until it no longer smelled of old dust but of effort, fresh, humble effort. Ethan noticed. Not that he said much. But each time he found the chores done before he asked, each time she stepped out of the way, without vanishing entirely, something tightened and softened all at once in his chest. He didn't know what to call it. Respect, maybe. Or fear. Fear that he might be starting to trust her. It had been years since he trusted anyone with a key, even metaphorically. Then came the boy. It was mid-afternoon, and the sun burned high and wide. The wind had settled, but the air still stirred with the hum of dry bees and brittle heat. From across the corral came a scream, sharp, high, unmistakably young. Lucy was closer. She moved without a word. The boy, no more than 3 or 4, had slipped through a cracked fence plank and fallen into the path of the oxen cart. His small body trembled in the dirt, one leg pinned at an odd angle. Lucy slid in beside him, spoke low, calm and steady. She didn't ask what happened. She just acted. Ethan ran as well, but by the time he got there, she had the boy upright, cradling him gently with a makeshift sling from her shawl. She looked up, eyes calm, not triumphant, not afraid, just focused. The boy's mother came running, all fire and panic. "What did you do to my son?" she snapped. Lucy didn't flinch. "He's safe," she said. "His ankle's twisted, but it'll mend." The woman hesitated, looked down at her boy, now quiet in Lucy's arms, clutching her sleeve like it was home. Tears overtook anger. She whispered, "Thank you," and took him with trembling hands. After they left, Ethan stood beside the fence post for a long while. "You didn't panic," he said finally. Lucy shrugged. "Panicking doesn't help a broken bone." He nodded slowly, then added, "You were good with him." She didn't answer that. But something shifted, not in the sky nor the earth, but in him. He found himself watching her more openly after that. Not just from behind windows, but from beside her, passing tools, asking short questions, occasionally sharing a piece of jerky or leftover pie. Small things. Things he hadn't done in years. Then came Darla Wayne. She rode up in a glossy black cart, the only woman in town, who kept her carriage polished even through a drought. She stepped down like a stage actress. Dress, sharp eyes sharper. Her glance at Lucy was brief, but venomous. "I see you've taken on charity," she said to Ethan. "She's working," he replied coolly. Darla's lips curled, but not in kindness. "She won't last. Girls like her don't." Ethan stiffened. He wanted to say, "She already has." But he stayed silent, watching Lucy pretend not to listen from across the yard. That night, Deputy John Hale stopped by. He wasn't an unwhite man, loyal to Ethan in his own rigid way, but his sense of order left little room for strays. "Where'd she come from?" he asked, not looking up from his ledger. "She's helping." "That's enough," Ethan replied. "Is it?" John asked. "She got a past." "We all do," Ethan said, then added, "Some of us just don't wear it on our sleeves." John didn't push, but his silence lingered like the dust Lucy stirred each morning, and Ethan lay awake longer that night. He told himself it was the wind, but it wasn't. The garden had once been Anna's. Her hands were in its every root, quiet, patient hands that turned dry dirt into bloom. She had planted marigolds in the corners, beans beside carrots, lavender along the fence. After her passing, Ethan had let it all go to dust. The soil hardened, the weeds crept in, and no one dared step into it again. Until Lucy did. One morning, just after sunrise, Ethan found her there kneeling at the edge of that forgotten earth, sleeves rolled dirt under her nails. She had brought out old tools, washed them clean. A bag of seeds lay beside her, torn open with care. Ethan didn't say a word. He stood back, arms crossed, jaw tight. He hadn't asked her to do this. He wasn't sure if he should feel anger or something far more dangerous, gratitude. He watched as she dug rows slow and precise, humming a soft tune. That tune, he knew it. Anna's lullaby. The one she sang to seedlings and once to him, when the world still felt young. He swallowed hard. Lucy didn't look up, didn't ask for approval. But he stayed longer than he meant to. Later that afternoon, the garden looked almost reborn. Neat rows stretched across the patch, marigold sprouts nestled between new green stems. A low wooden sign, worn and cracked, had been dusted clean. Anna's name, once hidden beneath grime, was now visible in faded ink. Ethan touched it without thinking. His fingers hovered, then dropped away. Something in him shifted again. A subtle quake. This girl, this stranger, she had trespassed into a space he thought was sacred. And yet the garden didn't resist her. It welcomed her. And so he let it happen. That night the wind changed. Colder, edgier. Lucy went to check the barn before bed, lantern in hand. The wind teased the hem of her skirt as she crossed the yard. Everything felt quiet, too quiet. The kind of quiet that hums with warning. She reached the stable door and paused. Something moved behind her. She turned sharply. Nothing. Just the field stretched in silver moonlight. Then a breath. Not hers. A shadow at the fence line, still watching. She stepped back toward the house, gripping the lantern tighter. Her eyes scanned the dark, but the figure had vanished. Only the wind remained. The next morning, near the garden, boot prints marred the soft soil. Heavy, deliberate steps. They hadn't been there the night before. Ethan bent down to examine them, brows furrowed. When he stood, Lucy was already there, watching him. She didn't speak. He didn't ask. But their eyes met, quite wary, knowing. Someone had been watching her, and Ethan felt something rise in him. Not fear. Not yet. But a promise. One he hadn't made in years. The clap came slow and deliberate, shattering the quiet of late afternoon. Ethan turned toward the sound, instinctively, eyes narrowing, beneath the brim of his hat. Lucy froze mid-motion in the garden rows, a trowel still in her hand. The sun was dipping low, casting long shadows, and one of them stepped forward into the light. He was tall, cloaked in black, with a face half hidden beneath a white-brimmed hat. His boots sank into the dust like they'd been born from it. Jeremiah the Vulture Black. Ethan's jaw tightened. He hadn't seen the man in years, but the air changed the moment he arrived, thick, with old smoke and older sins. Jeremiah grinned like a fox who'd found a wounded lamb. "Well, well, Marshal Cole," he drawled. "Still taking in strays, I see." His gaze flicked to Lucy. Her back straightened, shoulders stiff. She didn't need to look to know that voice. Her skin had already remembered. Ethan stepped forward, voice low and controlled. "What do you want, Jeremiah?" The man chuckled, slow and cutting. "Me. I came to see a ghost." He leaned lazily on the fence post, eyes not leaving Lucy. "Funny thing about ghosts, they don't stay dead. They change names, bury their pasts in soft soil. But me, I remember every soul I ever owned." Lucy finally turned, face pale, but burning. "You don't own me." Jeremiah tipped his head mockingly. "Not anymore. But you were mine once, and folks don't just shake off what they've been, girl." Ethan moved closer to her side. He could feel the tremor in her breath. The way her fists clenched told him everything she didn't say. Jeremiah's eyes slid to Ethan again. Tell me, Marshall, do you even know who she is? Or are you just playing hero again? Ethan didn't reply. His fingers hovered near his hip, where steel waited. But Jeremiah wasn't finished. His voice dropped oily and quiet. You're walking around with a fuse in your pocket, Cole. And if you think she's just a poor little runaway, well, he smiled wider. You haven't told her everything, have you? The words hung in the air like gunpowder. Ethan didn't blink, but inside his stomach twisted. Lucy looked between them, confused, alarmed. What is he talking about? She asked, voice barely above a whisper. Jeremiah answered before Ethan could. Oh, he knows, and deep down, so does she. There's a reckoning coming, Marshall. For both of you. With that, he turned, boots grinding into the dirt as he walked away. But not before tossing one final glance over his shoulder. She may not remember everything yet, but when she does, you'd better pray she still looks at you the way she does now. Silence clung to the farm after he disappeared down the road. Lucy stood frozen. Then, with a brittle breath, she murmured, What did he mean? What haven't you told me? Ethan couldn't answer. Not yet. He looked at her, this woman, who had come into his life like a second chance, and felt the weight of what still lay buried, and how close it now was to breaking through. Night fell over Cole Farm with a solemn hush, the rumble of horses fading on the far ridge. Jeremiah the vulture, black, reappeared at dusk, his boots striking the wooden gate with cold intent. Ethan stood in the kitchen doorway, lantern in hand. Lucy's shadow trembled behind him. Jeremiah regarded them both with lethal calm. Marshal, Jeremiah began, voice low and dangerous. You're a good man, too. Good, perhaps. So I'll give you a choice. He paused, lifting one hand to tap his hat. You deliver me what's mine, that runaway girl, or I'll have you accused of harboring criminals. Rumor flies fast in a town like Dusty Hollow. I can ruin you. Ethan's heart pounded. The lean of his shoulders stiffened. The burden of choice settled like a stone. Lucy stepped forward, voice unsteady, but fierce. I'll go. I don't want to bring him to your doorstep. I'll leave. Ethan cut her off, stepping before her, voice shaking but resolute. No. He turned to Jeremiah, every word measured. She stays. If you think you can threaten me into giving her away, you're wrong. You'll not break her again. Jeremiah regarded Ethan, smile cold and amused. You're out of your depth, Marshall. I'll see how long your mercy lasts under pressure. He turned and vanished into the twilight, boots crunching on dust one last time. Silence reclaimed the farm. Lucy sank to the edge of the porch in trembling waves of exhaustion. Ethan's hand hovered near hers, not touching. Distrust, gratitude, fear, and longing fought across her face. Inside, Ethan's mind raced. He loved the silence of the farm, but for the first time silence screamed. Every definition of who he was, lawman, loner, survivor, recoiled. He had opened his doors. He had risked everything. And Jeremiah's ultimatum pulled at the fault lines of his convictions. He knelt beside Lucy, voice low, raw. I know you're thinking you'll do better out there, but he'll come back for you and I can't let that. Not again. Lucy's shoulders shook, tears slipping. You've already suffered enough because of me, she whispered. I just wanted to disappear. Ethan raised a hand to her face, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. You don't get to disappear. Not anymore. You belong here, with me. Her eyes, wide and uncertain, found his. Her lower lip trembled. Doubt ran deep, but so did something unwed. A hush held space between them. Outside, the wind rustled in the dried grass, reminding them of dust and miles. Inside, the world narrowed to two hearts, raw and exposed. Ethan leaned forward. Hesitation folded into determination. Lucy didn't pull away. Their lips met, a gentle, trembling contact that felt like everything they'd both needed. In that moment, barriers fell. She wasn't a mistake, not a stray. He wasn't a rescuer. He was a man capable of belonging. They lingered for a breath, then pulled apart slowly. No words passed. Only the unspoken heartbeat of trust forming in the dark. Ethan placed his forehead against hers. "No one can take you from me," he murmured. Lucy rested her hand on his chest, breath catching. She whispered, "Promise?" He nodded softly, sealing it. "I swear it." The air in Dusty Hollow's town hall was thick as old smoke. Ethan stood tall in the middle of the room, surrounded by faces that had once offered handshakes and warm smiles, now cold, unreadable. Beside Mrs. Darla Wayne, dressed in mourning black, like she was burying more than truth, stood Jeremiah Black, with the smug posture of a man already victorious. Lucy Gray. Jeremiah began loud and clear, "Isn't just a lost little girl. She's a spy sent to infiltrate Marshal Cole, dig for secrets, and take over his land." The lie rolled out smooth as poison. Gasps rippled. Ethan didn't flinch, but Lucy sitting beside him stiffened. Her white eyes brimmed with disbelief. When the council president brought down the gavel and declared Marshal Cole stripped of his badge, the silence that followed felt like the sound of something sacred breaking. No one spoke for him. No one stood. That evening, they rode back to the farm in silence. Lucy stared out across the withered fields, her eyes fixed on the garden she had brought back to life. Now the soil seemed grayer, the wind colder. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "All this, it's because of me." "No," Ethan answered quietly. "They're coming after you because you did the right thing." That night, neither of them slept. Lucy stayed in her small room off the porch. Ethan sat by the fire, his gun resting on the table, fingers coiled but still. His thoughts circled like wolves. He had failed the law. He couldn't fail her too. Just past midnight, the wind shifted. A strange scent crept through the cracks. Smoke. But not from the hearth. He stood, stepped out safety. Flames were licking at the barn, bright against the darkness. Fire. Real. Intentional. "Lucy," he shouted. Lucy, no answer. He bolted toward her room. The bed was empty. Her shawl, the one she always wore, was gone. So was she. Panic took over. He scoured the grounds, shouting her name, heart pounding. Then behind the barn tracks. Drag marks. Wagon wheels deep in the dust. On the fence a smear of blood. And snagged on a nail a shred of silver fabric. Her dress. His hands clenched into fists. He didn't need evidence. Jeremiah. This was his work. Calculated, cruel, unforgivable. Ethan turned, grabbed his coat and revolver, and mounted his horse. No plan. No pause. Only one truth: he had to bring her back. She awoke to pain pounding in her skull. Her hands were bound, mouth dry. The wagon rocked beneath her. Outside, horses galloped in rhythm. Flickering lamplight passed through the cracks. A shadow leaned in. Jeremiah. He crouched, staring like a collector admiring stolen goods. "You've softened him," he said. "Let's see how long his promises hold when there's no badge to back them." Lucy didn't reply. But in her eyes, something flared. Not fear, not yet defeat, but fire. Ethan galloped across the dark plain, the moon casting a silver trail along the wagon tracks. Wind tore at his coat. The trail led west toward the foothills. He gritted his teeth. Too much had been taken from him already. Not this time. No more silence. No more surrender. He would find her. Or burn the world trying. Ethan thundered across the empty plain moonlight, guiding his charge toward the foothills, where Jeremiah's wagon tracks blurred into the night. Behind him, he halted, heart pounding, breath ragged. The tracks led into darkness. Taking a deep breath, he stepped toward the yawning pit. Suddenly, Deputy John Hale emerged from the shadows, pistol in hand, face stern but resolute. "Marshal," John said, voice thick, yet steady. "I meant to let you go alone." But then I thought, I owe you. Ethan blinked, not in surprise, but in raw recognition, loyalty born in fire. John had once doubted, Lucy questioned Ethan. Now he stood beside them, whatever danger lay ahead. John led the way, down jagged stones, past collapsed timbers, into the reef of the dark rock. Lantern light flickered ahead, illuminating hushed, gravelly whispers. They brought her deep inside this quarry, John whispered. 5 of 4. They advanced over rocky terrain and into the quarry's heart. A faint glow revealed the alcove where Jeremiah's group held Lucy like sharks drifting toward spilled blood. Chaos erupted the moment they breached the cave. Ethan fired first. 2 shots cracked. One henchman fell, clutching his leg. Another lunged with a knife. John pushed Lucy aside, but the blade grazed his shoulder, blood blooming across his coat. He gritted his teeth and kicked. The Ethan surged forward, fury propelling him. He aimed at the third thug, raising a pistol. One sharp shot to the thigh ended him. The fourth attacked Ethan head-on, brandishing his own pistol at his stomach. Lucy screamed. Ethan twisted aside just a moment too late. A bullet grazed his ribs, agonizing pain slicing through his flank. He didn't pause. With cold resolve, he ended the attack. Jeremiah's 4 men lay silent and still on the stone floor. Suddenly all eyes turned to Jeremiah, standing at the edge of the cavern, pistol drawn, yet expression unnervingly composed. An elemental silence fell. Jeremiah smirked. With a swift motion, he drew a dagger and pressed it to Lucy's marshal Cole. He began, his voice a razor whisper, "I can kill her, or make you watch." Lucy gasped, heart pounding. Ethan staggered, clutching his hip, pain searing where the bullet had struck his rib. Jeremiah pressed the blade tighter and revealed, "Let's lay it all bare. That heroic Marshal Cole you cling to, he was the one who sentenced your father to hang. I only picked up what he discarded. I cleaned up the debris of his so-called justice." Lucy froze. Ethan inhaled sharply. Only the ragged breaths and soft groans from the fallen men remained. Something inside him. For Lucy the world spiraled. The man who sheltered her had condemned her father. Violence engulfed her. Jeremiah tightened his grip. Tension climaxed. In a sudden act of defiance, Lucy jerked her head backward. Jeremiah lost balance. The knife Ethan lunged, but too late. Jeremiah teetered, eyes wide, face twisted in shock and rage, then pitched forward over the edge into the abyss. As he fell, his voice echoed off the stones. "In the end, you're just like me." Then he vanished into darkness. Silence swallowed all. John, wounded but conscious, staggered forward. He placed a trembling hand on Ethan's arm. "I was wrong about her," he managed. "Protect her. For both of you." Blood soaked John's shoulder. Ethan knelt beside him, pressing a temporary bandage into the wound, tears mixing with sand and sweat. Turning to Lucy, her face pale, eyes wide, she laid her trembling hand over Ethan's. John coughed once, then looked at them both, understanding and regret lighting his gaze. Ethan's world narrowed. John's wound, his own guilt born of buried secrets and fierce love for Lucy. He rose, lifted Lucy tightly. Outside the quarry, dawn's first pale light touched the rock walls. In that moment, they were survivors not just of fire and betrayal, but of their own choices. And Ethan realized the path ahead, reveal the truths he had hidden, rebuild what was broken, and face judgment together. Dawn's pale light filtered through the shattered timbers of the farmhouse window as Ethan stirred. A sharp ache cut through him with every breath. His side still bruised, the ragged bandage fresh from Lucy's hands. She had kept vigil through the night, leaning over him, gentle and grieving. When she saw her tears, he offered a faint smile. Her eyes darted away. She moved like a ghost in the dawn, packing the cloak she wore on the morning she first arrived, the shawl stained with soil and tears. Ethan rose shakily and reached for her hand before she turned away. "Lucy, Lucy," he whispered, voice raw. "I should have told you the truth. From the moment I understood who Jeremiah was, I should have spoken. I never meant to keep my past from you, even if it meant losing your trust. What I did, what I didn't do, I'm sorry. For your father, and for you." Her eyes shone with grief and hesitation but held firm. Without a word, she slipped past him and stood in the doorway. "I can't stay," she said quietly. The words trembled. "I loved you, and I wanted to belong. But I can't reconcile love with the verdict that destroyed my family." She paused before stepping out. "I need time." The door clicked shut behind her. Light invaded the empty space. Her feet carried her down the dusty road beyond Dusty Hollow, each step fueled by dissonance. She'd grown up on stories of her parents' innocence and the betrayal that bought her survival. Jeremiah's words had set fire to her trust, but Ethan's apology had equally stung. She remembered fear the auction block chain's foreign hands. She remembered the dawn at the farm soil under her fingernails, the scent of rosemary, the warmth of shared a meal. But she also remembered her father's hanging the man her protector had helped condemn. The contradiction burned inside her. She didn't cry. She walked until the roads faded, until every memory echoed behind her. Ethan awoke once more to emptiness. Quiet souls across the floor, whisper of cloth folded. He let himself fall back onto the bed, pain and regret weighing him down. He noticed still the cloak and shawl flowing there, scent of lavender soil loss. He moved toward the window. Outside the wreckage of their shared life stood silent. Charred garden, splintered beams, and in the center of the ashes a single marigold petals edged in soot. He knelt by it, trembling fingers pressed into cold black earth. He whispered her name like litany, "Lucy, Lucy," until the wind swallowed every echo. In the days that followed, Ethan mended the farmhouse roof, rebuilt shingle and scaffold. He repaired the door latch Lucy once oiled. Yet every strike of hammer and every saw of wood reminded him it was too small. Trust in love could not be hammered back. He revisited places they had walked, the fenced garden, the old porch, and spoke into the wind. "If you hear me, come back." He found John's discarded satchel near the barn. In it, the final note written in trembling ink. "Take care of her, Ethan. She belongs to your future. Don't bury truth behind silence." Ethan folded the note slowly, understanding the cost he'd paid not for justice or law, but for his silence and protection. Weeks passed. Ethan left messages with neighbors, rode to nearby crossroads, searching for Louisa Greystone, Lucy's true name, Jeremiah's lie made whole. He found nothing. The sheriff's badge lay untouched in a drawer. He didn't remove it. It weighed too heavy. Each evening, he lit 3 candles, one for Anna, one for John, and one for Lucy, the flame flickering in the dust-mote air. Lucy's departure was not cowardice. It was heartbreak carried too long. She had loved despite betrayal, stayed despite suspicion, but couldn't reconcile love with guilt imposed by unspoken truths. Ethan's apology came too late. For Ethan, the tragedy wasn't losing Lucy. It was losing her trust. Silence had cost more than he ever imagined. He had saved her life, but couldn't protect her dignity or her heart. Toward the reckoning, Ethan understood his next step. He must find her, not just to say he was sorry, but to show her truth, humility, and accountability. He must rebuild more than his farm. He must rebuild what he broke. Because love without truth is fragile. Redemption without confession is impossible. Ethan stood in the early morning light, his fingers gently sliding his badge into a drawer. Lucy was gone. Her leaving made the badge meaningless. Dusty Hollow whispered around him, but he no longer heard it. He walked through the blackened garden, where the seeds Lucy had once planted were beginning to sprout again. Each morning, he returned to that flower bed, marigold, lavender, rosemary, green, shoots pushing up through the dark earth. Lucy had nurtured this garden, and now he alone bore the mission of restoring it. He tilled the soil, watered the fragile buds, and watched the petals bloom in the place where grief had once reigned. But emptiness grew with every flower. He realized restoring the garden wasn't enough. He needed to find her. He packed a small saddlebag, a water flask, a faded photograph of Lucy, a handful of lavender sprigs, and one final letter. Lucy, Lucy. This is my apology carried over sand roads because staying would never have been enough. I failed you twice in my silence and in what I didn't do. I depart to find you, to speak the truths I buried. If I reach you, I will look into your eyes and say them. If I fall, know that I died trying. Ethan. He slipped the letter into the saddlebag and rode westward. The desert stretched endlessly to the horizon, and his ribs throbbed with each breath. The wound from the gunshot remained unhealed. Sharp pain seared through his side with every motion of the horse. Days melted into one another under the merciless sun. Ethan pressed on, but one afternoon the pain overwhelmed him. In a lonely expanse of cracked earth, he dismounted and collapsed. His final thought was of Lucy, of the garden, the silence, the apology he had never fully spoken. He lay on the ground, clutching the letter as his eyelids fluttered and he slipped into unconsciousness. The desert wind whispered across him as he lay still, half buried by sand. Lucy, now known as Sister Rosa, tended the simple herb garden at a desert convent. Light filtered through arched windows, and children she had rescued, previously lost and afraid, now laughed and learned under her care. One morning, a dusty child she had once helped approached her, holding a letter with trembling hands. The envelope was stamped a dusty hollow. Lucy's breath caught. She recognized the handwriting, the slight slant, the faint scent of lavender. Gently she opened the letter. If you're reading this, I didn't make it back. It began, Ethan's apology penned with trembling ink. Please know that finding you was worth anyone. Your forgiveness means more to me than my own redemption. Lucy's vision blurred with tears. She sank onto a bench as the child watched, concerned but trusting. She read again his confession, his hope, his collapse. The words trembled in her heart. Without hesitation, she quietly left the convent. She packed essential items, herbs for teething children, lavender and rosemary seeds, symbols of home and hope. She rode off westward, heart pounding with fear and determination. Lucy felt fear. She had once run to protect herself from betrayal. Now she rode into the desert to save him from death, from regret, and from silence. The desert became a metaphor, a place of endings and rebirth. A place to either find him or release her sorrow. Ethan lay motionless. Beneath the muted desert sky, the wind tugged at his scarf, stirred the lavender in his saddlebag. His eyes opened to a pale canopy of sky, blurry and vast. Then came a small voice. Are you hurt? A pilgrim crouched by his side, offering water. A group of desert travelers had discovered him. A young child reached into his dusty satchel and found the letter. The handwriting struck the child. He urged the pilgrims to bring the letter and Ethan to the convent beyond the desert hills. Lucy arrived at the edge of a canyon, before the convent sunlight, slanting low lavender petals tangled in her hair. She carried the sprigs he had planted. Each bloom carried a memory. She found his horse tied to a mesquite tree. The saddlebag was gone, but a small paper was pinned to the bridle. She opened it. It was the letter. Understanding flooded through her. Her legs trembled, but she did not cry. She followed the pilgrim's footsteps down the dusty road, heart racing with hope and fear. They brought Ethan into the courtyard of the convent church. He lay pale on a cot, bandaged and fragile. His eyes opened as she knelt beside him. At first neither spoke. She heard the wind rustle through the garden beyond the cloister. Then he whispered, Lucy. Tears slipped from her eyes as she bowed her head. He closed his eyes, Don't leave again. She clasped his hand. I'm here. Let's go home. The sun rose gentle over Dusty Hollow as Ethan and Lucy rode down the familiar lane toward the farm they once lost. The porch still sagged, the barn charred, but the place felt alive again beneath their steady steps. Dust settled behind them. Ahead lay a new purpose. In the weeks that followed, they rebuilt together. Ethan oversaw the walls, the roof, the sturdy fence. Lucy managed the gardens and the modest rooms they transformed into simple dormitories. Slowly, people started arriving, children who had nowhere to go, wanderers with empty hearts. Friends from the mission brought supplies. The fields hummed. Was that hope growing? Ethan found himself teaching the boys to graft fruit trees on grafts of rosemary. Lucy guided toddlers in planting marigold seeds under the shade of lavender bushes. Children laughed again, and the farm pulsed with new life, not just crops and flowers, but compassion and shelter. In their private moments, Ethan watched Lucy smile with the children and felt the ache he'd carried soften. He carried the burden of what he'd hidden, and Lucy carried a courage he could hardly measure. They forged new habits, evening meals together, the sound of living hearts replacing the echo of regret. One evening, Lucy asked to walk the garden with him. The lavender and rosemary bloomed wild, where the old garden had once revived. But beyond it, in a field they had never planted, dawn had coaxed a sea of wildflowers, marigold blue, flax desert poppies, all ghosting golden orange and dusty blue across the plain. The field was a miracle. Ethan paused beside her, dew sparkling on petals. Lucy's face glowed in the early sunset. Do you come here often? He asked softly. Lucy shook her head. Her eyes reflected more than memory. They reflected a dream reborn. She stepped closer. Ethan smelled rosemary and faint lavender. Lucy reached out, brushing petals with trembling fingers, letting the wind carry a whisper. Ethan, she began, voice fragile yet steady. He watched her heart slowing in the quiet. They had buried so much here, the old life, the garden that burned their old dreams. But the wildflowers had grown anyway. Lucy met his eyes. Her face was earnest, vulnerable, braver than anything he had done. She fell to one knee, pulling a simple ring of twisted silver and lavender blossoms from her pocket. I promise to protect you, she said, voice steady but gentle. You saved me, nurtured me, and together, we've saved more. I want this farm, and every sunrise, every bloom to be ours. Will you marry me? Ethan's chest tightened. His eyes glistened with disbelief, sorrow and joy all at once. He knelt beside her, resting his hand over the wildflower ring. He looked past her, beyond the field, into the years they lost and the life they had now. Yes, he breathed. Yes, Lucy. With all of me. They stood, hands entwined, the field of wildflowers, nodding around them as though blessing the vow. Below, with the children and orphaned boarders, laughter from the coverings drifted on the breeze. The farm had become what it always should have been, a place of nurture, trust, and renewal. Ethan took her hand, and they walked back toward the farmhouse. Rows of lavender and rosemary guided their steps. Behind them lay wildflowers blazing in the dying light, a horizon of second chances. In that final scene, the field they once watched die was now a living testament to hope reborn. Lucy had turned the garden of sorrow into a field of promise. And by her side, Ethan finally understood that redemption isn't just rebuilding, it's growing together, rooted in truth and love.